At the chaotic heart of London Heathrow, a gate agent held the power to ruin a day, to delay a journey, to humiliate a passenger. On this day, she chose Dr. Keenan Carter and Dr. Simone Dubois, a distinguished black couple, as her targets. In front of 100 staring eyes, she publicly denied them boarding on their flight to New York, her voice dripping with condescending authority. She questioned their tickets, their character, their very presence in the priority line. But what she didn't know was that this couple carried a secret, nestled within 2 small, dark blue booklets. A secret that would not only get them on that flight, but would detonate a karmic explosion, shattering her career, her reputation, and her entire life. The air in Terminal 3 of London Heathrow was thick with a unique blend of human anxiety and overpriced coffee. It was a symphony of rolling suitcases, frantic last calls, and the weary sighs of travelers caught in the liminal space between one country and the next. For Dr. Keenan Carter and his wife, Dr. Simone Dubois, this was familiar territory. Their lives were a series of such transitions, a blur of airport lounges, security checks, and time zones. Keenan was a senior advisor in international development policy, a man whose quiet demeanor belied a razor-sharp intellect that had untangled diplomatic knots from sub-Saharan Africa to Southeast Asia. Simone was an epidemiologist with the World Health Organization, a force of nature who chased down emerging pathogens with the same tenacity she applied to everything else in her life. They were returning to New York after a grueling but successful 2-week summit in Geneva. The trip had been a whirlwind of policy meetings, data analysis, and late-night negotiations that had left them both professionally fulfilled, but personally exhausted. Now all that stood between them and their comfortable Brooklyn brownstone was Royal Imperial Airways Flight 117. Group 1 boarding for New York JFK is now beginning at Gate 24B. A crisp, automated voice announced, cutting through the din. Keenan offered Simone a tired smile. "That's us. Ready for the final leg?" Simone adjusted the strap of her leather tote bag. "More than ready. I'm dreaming of our bed, a bottle of Malbec, and 2 days of absolutely no one asking me about viral mutation rates." They joined the short, orderly queue for priority boarding. They were seasoned travelers, their movements efficient and practiced. Their carry-on bags were perfectly sized, their travel documents tucked into a neat folio. They were the picture of understated elegance, Keenan in a tailored navy blazer and dark jeans, Simone in a chic, comfortable cashmere travel wrap. They stood quietly, engaged in a low conversation about which new restaurant to try when they got home, an island of calm in the terminal's turbulent sea. The gate agent presiding over their passage to tranquility, however, was anything but calm. Her name was Arya Clark, and she had been working this gate for 12 years. 12 years of dealing with entitled passengers, nonsensical airline policies, and the perpetual, soul-crushing exhaustion of shift work. To Arya, the gate was not a portal to exciting destinations. It was her personal fiefdom, a tiny kingdom of scanners and retractable barriers where her word was law. She was a woman in her late 40s, her face set in a permanent mask of strained patience, her uniform jacket pulled just a bit too tight across her shoulders. Before Keenan and Simone reached her, they watched her handle 2 other passengers. A young backpacker with a slightly oversized bag was subjected to a 5-minute lecture and forced to use the unforgiving metal sizer, which his bag failed by a scant centimeter. He was sent, red-faced, to the back of the main boarding queue to consolidate his belongings. Next, an elderly man who fumbled with his mobile boarding pass received a series of loud, exasperated sighs before Arya snatched the phone from his hand and scanned it herself, thrusting it back at him without a word. Simone nudged Keenan gently. She seems pleasant." "A long day for everyone," Keenan murmured, ever the diplomat. But when they stepped up to the podium, the atmosphere shifted from generically unpleasant to specifically hostile. Arya's eyes flicked over them, a quick, dismissive appraisal that lingered just a fraction of a second too long. She didn't greet them. She simply held out a hand, palm up, a gesture of impatient demand. Keenan handed her their passports and boarding passes. Arya took them, her painted nails tapping a staccato rhythm on the counter. She scanned Keenan's pass. Beep. Then Simone's. Beep. She then proceeded to scrutinize their passports, flipping through the pages as if searching for a forgery. "These tickets," she said, her voice flat, not looking at them. "Where did you purchase them?" The question was odd, out of protocol. "Through our designated travel coordinator," Keenan replied smoothly. "Is there a problem?" Arya's eyes finally lifted, meeting his. They were cold, devoid of any pretense of customer service. Sometimes, third-party sites issue fraudulent priority codes. We have to be careful. She stared pointedly at their casual but expensive attire. These are business-class seats, very expensive. The implication was as thick and suffocating as the cabin air on a long-haul flight. Simone's posture stiffened. The exhaustion in her eyes was replaced by a spark of indignation. "We are well aware of the cost," Simone said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Our travel is handled by our employers. Are you suggesting there's an issue with our tickets? Or with us?" Arya ignored the direct question. She turned to her computer, typing with performative slowness. The line behind the couple was growing. A man in a pinstripe suit checked his Rolex. A mother with a toddler bounced the child impatiently. The low murmur of the terminal seemed to fade, replaced by the focused, uncomfortable silence of a public confrontation. Arya hummed, a sound of manufactured concern. "I'm seeing a flag on these seat assignments. I'm not sure you're supposed to be in this group. You might need to step aside while I sort this out." Keenan kept his composure, but he could feel the heat rising in his own chest. This was a familiar, ugly dance. The subtle questioning, the baseless suspicion, the deliberate creation of a problem where none existed. It was designed to make them feel small, to make them feel like they didn't belong. "I can assure you there is no flag," Keenan said, his tone firm but level. "Perhaps you could check again. We were checked in this morning without any issue. Our luggage is already on the plane." "Sir, the computer is telling me something different," Arya snapped, her voice rising in volume. She was now playing to the audience, casting herself as the diligent protector of rules and order. "And our luggage system is separate. Now, I need you to step out of the line. You are holding up the boarding process for our other business-class passengers." She gestured dismissively to the side, a queen banishing unruly subjects from her court. The public humiliation was now complete. They were being segregated, marked as problematic in front of a line of their fellow travelers. Simone opened her mouth to argue, her eyes blazing, but Kenan put a restraining hand on her arm. He gave a slight shake of his head. Not yet. They moved to the designated area of shame next to the podium, the cold stares and hushed whispers of the other passengers following them like a physical weight. Arya, a smirk of triumph playing on her lips, turned to the next person in line. "Next!" she barked, her victory assured. Or so she thought. The spot where Arya had banished them was a small, purgatorial space between the boarding podium and a large window overlooking the tarmac. Below, baggage carts buzzed around the belly of the massive Airbus A350 that was supposed to take them home. For Kanan and Simone, it felt like a fishbowl. Every passenger who walked past shot them a look, a mixture of pity, suspicion, and a palpable sense of relief that it wasn't them. Simone's anger was a low, simmering fire. "This is outrageous, Keenan. Absolutely, unequivocally outrageous. A flag on our seats. She didn't even look for a flag. She looked at our faces and decided we didn't belong." "I know," Keenan said, his voice a low rumble. He was watching Arya, his gaze analytical, dissecting her behavior. He saw more than just prejudice. He saw a deep-seated bitterness, a woman who felt powerless in her life and wielded her minor authority like a cudgel. "She's enjoying this. This is about her, not us." "I don't care who it's about," Simone shot back, her voice tight with fury. "She's publicly humiliating us based on nothing. We have to do something." "We will," Keenan assured her, his hand finding hers and giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Patience. Let's let her build her own cage." They watched as Arya processed the rest of the Group 1 passengers. She was a different person with them. She smiled at a blonde woman in a designer tracksuit, sharing a laugh about the weather in New York. She cooed over a baby and wished a family a wonderful holiday. She offered a deferential, "Have a safe flight, Mr. Abernathy," to a portly businessman who was clearly a regular. With each pleasantry she offered to others, the insult to Keenan and Simone deepened. Her discrimination wasn't just an act, it was a targeted, deliberate choice. After the last priority passenger had boarded, Arya made a general announcement for Group 2 to begin lining up. She did not look at Kanan and Simone. She treated them as if they were invisible, part of the airport furniture. This was the breaking point for Simone. She strode back to the podium. Keenan followed a step behind, his calm presence a necessary anchor to her rising storm. "Ma'am," Simone began, her voice cutting through Arya's preparations for the next wave of passengers. "We have been waiting for 10 minutes. You said you needed to sort something out. Have you done so?" Arya looked up, feigning surprise, as if she'd completely forgotten about them. "Oh, right. Yes. I've looked into it. It seems there was a system error, and these seats were double booked. I'm afraid there are no other seats available in the business class cabin." It was a lie, and a lazy one at that. A double booking issue would have been flagged at check-in, not at the gate. And the solution wouldn't be to simply leave 2 passengers stranded. Keenan stepped forward. "That seems highly unlikely. Could we please see the screen? Could you show us the error message?" Arya bristled, her authority challenged. "I am not permitted to show passengers our internal systems. Look, I can book you onto the next flight. There's one in about 6 hours. It has some economy seats left." The offer was so insulting, it was breathtaking. A 6-hour wait for a downgrade, offered as if it were a generous favor. "Let me be perfectly clear," Simone said, her voice dropping to an icy calm that was far more intimidating than shouting. "We are not accepting a 6-hour delay. We are not accepting an economy seat. We are ticketed, confirmed passengers for these seats on this flight. You have our passports and our boarding passes. We are getting on that plane." The sheer force of Simone's conviction seemed to momentarily throw Arya off balance. A junior gate agent, a young man named Paul, glanced nervously between his superior and the couple. He knew this was wrong. He'd seen Arya on power trips before. But this was different. This felt dangerous. Arya quickly recovered, her defensiveness hardening into outright aggression. "Listen, I don't know what you're used to, but that's not how it works. You can't just demand things. I am the final authority at this gate, and I am telling you that you are not boarding this flight. Not in these seats." She leaned forward, lowering her voice into a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. "I don't know what kind of scam you two are trying to pull to get a free upgrade or a compensation package, but it's not going to work with me. I've seen it all before." The accusation hung in the air, ugly and explicit. scam. It was the final, unforgivable piece of her narrative. These black people could not possibly have afforded these seats legitimately. Therefore, they must be criminals. The few remaining passengers in the queue stared, wide-eyed. Paul, the junior agent, looked horrified, his face pale. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it, clearly terrified of Aria. Keenan Carter, a man who had negotiated with warlords and stared down corrupt ministers, felt a profound and weary sadness settle over him. He had hoped for reason. He had hoped for de-escalation. But Aria had closed every door except one. A scam, Keenan repeated softly, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. That is what you believe this is. I know what I see, Aria retorted, crossing her arms, a smug look of certainty on her face. Now I have a plane to dispatch. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the gate area. If you refuse, I'll call airport security. The threat of security was the final move, the checkmate in her small-minded game. To Aria, this was over. She had successfully identified a problem, flexed her authority, and protected the sanctity of her airline from two people she had judged unworthy. You are making a serious, career-altering mistake, Keenan said, his voice devoid of anger, stating it as a simple, undeniable fact, like gravity or the passage of time. Aria laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. Is that a threat? You're going to report me? Go ahead. It'll be your word against mine and the computer record I'm about to enter. She turned back to her terminal, her fingers poised over the keyboard, ready to seal their fate and officially offload them from the flight. She was about to type in the command that would make her victory complete. That won't be necessary, Keenan said. His voice was calm, but it carried a new weight, a resonance that made Aria's fingers pause. I believe there has been a profound misunderstanding of who we are. Simone, darling, would you mind? Simone held Keenan's gaze. She understood immediately. The time for patience was over. The time for revelation had arrived. She reached into her tote bag, bypassing the folio that held their regular passports, and retrieved a separate, smaller leather case. She unzipped it. The sound was a quiet harbinger of the chaos to come. The air at Gate 24B was thick with unspoken tension. Aria Clark stood with her hands on her hips, a triumphant warrior who had successfully defended her territory. Keenan and Simone stood before her, not defeated, but imbued with a strange new calm. The remaining passengers lingered, sensing that the drama was not yet over. Simone opened the small leather case. Inside, nestled against a silk lining, were 2 passports, but they were not the standard burgundy color of a United States passport. They were a deep, commanding navy blue, almost black, with the words "Diplomatic Passport" and the Great Seal of the United States embossed in brilliant gold on the front. She slid them across the counter. The movement was deliberate, silent, and final. They came to a rest directly in front of Aria's keyboard. Aria glanced down, her eyes registering the unfamiliar color. Annoyance flickered across her face. What are these? I've already seen your passports. No, Keenan said gently. You've seen our tourist passports. These are our official passports. Please open them. With a put-upon sigh, Aria picked one up. The texture was different, the cover stiffer, more substantial. She flipped it open. And then she froze. It was as if someone had hit a pause button on her entire being. Her condescending smirk evaporated, replaced by a slack-jawed mask of disbelief. The color drained from her face, leaving behind a pasty, sickly pallor. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, scanned the page. The photograph was of Dr. Keenan Carter, but the text below it was what held her paralyzed. Name: Carter. Keenan Anthony. Title: Diplomatic Attaché, Special Envoy for Global Development Initiatives. Issuing Authority: United States Department of State Bearer, is abroad on a diplomatic assignment for the United States government. All courtesies and privileges, as prescribed by international law and treaty, should be extended to the bearer. Her trembling fingers reached for the second passport, Simone's. The information was just as staggering. Name: Dubois, Simone. Renee. Title: Diplomatic Attaché, Senior Scientific Liaison, Global Health Security. Issuing Authority: United States Department of State Bearer is abroad on a diplomatic assignment. The words swam before Aria's eyes. Diplomatic. Special Envoy. All courtesies and privileges. These weren't just fancy job titles. They were designations that carried the full weight and authority of the US government. These were not mere business travelers. These were VIPs of a level she had never encountered, individuals who could shut down an airport with a single phone call. Her scammers were, in fact, protected diplomats on official state business. The silence at the gate stretched for an eternity. The junior agent, Paul, leaned over slightly to see what had caused his boss to short-circuit. His eyes widened, and he took an involuntary step back from the podium as if it were radioactive. "Oh my God," Paul whispered, the words barely audible. Aria's mind was a maelstrom of panic. Her entire constructed reality, her authority, her judgment, her supposed victory, had been utterly annihilated by two small blue books. Every condescending remark, every baseless accusation, every dismissive gesture replayed in her head, now cast in a horrifying new light. She hadn't been disciplining unruly passengers. She had been harassing, insulting, and attempting to deny boarding to agents of a foreign government. The legal and political term, diplomatic immunity, flashed in her brain, a concept she vaguely understood from action movies. But now it felt like a guillotine hanging over her head. Keenan spoke again, his voice still calm, but now it held the chilling finality of a judge delivering a verdict. As I'm sure you can now appreciate, Ms. Clark, our travel is not a holiday. We are returning from a critical debriefing in Geneva and are scheduled to present our findings at the United Nations tomorrow morning. This flight is not a preference. It is a necessity for our official duties. He paused, letting the full weight of his statement sink in. Your flag on our seats, your accusations of fraud, and your threat to call security have now caused a significant delay, not just to our personal travel, but to official government business. This has the potential to become a matter of international protocol. International protocol. The phrase echoed in the cavernous terminal, sounding to Aria like a death knell for her career. She finally found her voice, but it was a pathetic, strangled squeak. I didn't know. That is precisely the problem, Simone said, her voice cutting like a surgeon's scalpel. You didn't know. You didn't ask. You didn't seek to clarify. You simply saw two black faces in business class and made a series of assumptions. Every action you have taken since we arrived at this podium has been based on prejudice, not procedure. Aria began to stammer, her hands fluttering uselessly over the counter. I can fix this. I'll get you right on board. She grabbed her scanner, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold it. But Keenan placed his hand gently over hers, stopping her. No, he said softly. I don't think you are in a position to fix anything, Ms. Clark. In fact, I think it's best if you don't touch our documents, or your computer, again. Paul, he said, turning to the junior agent, who looked as if he'd seen a ghost. I believe your station manager needs to be informed of this situation. Immediately. Paul nodded dumbly, his eyes still fixed on the blue passports. He fumbled for his radio, his fingers slipping on the buttons. The other passengers, who had been watching this unfold with rapt attention, were now murmuring amongst themselves. A man in the front of the queue, who had been filming the entire exchange on his phone, slowly lowered the device, a look of stunned comprehension on his face. The story had changed. This was no longer a simple case of a rude gate agent. This was something much, much bigger. Arya Clark stood frozen behind her counter, a monument to her own catastrophic misjudgment. In her small kingdom, she had been the queen, but she had just tried to imprison 2 royal envoys from a far more powerful empire, and its wrath was about to descend upon her with unimaginable force. The boarding process for Flight 117 had come to a complete and utter halt. The arrival of David Chen, the Royal Imperial Airways station manager for Terminal 3, was heralded by the frantic squawking of Paul's radio. Chen was a man perpetually in motion, a wiry, high-energy figure whose job was to solve logistical impossibilities and soothe the egos of irate travelers. When he arrived at Gate 24B, breathless and already composing apologies in his head, he found a scene of utter paralysis. The gate was packed with anxious passengers. The flight crew was visible at the end of the jet bridge looking back with concern, and at the center of it all stood a pale, trembling Arya Clark, and a black couple exuding an aura of formidable, unassailable calm. "What is going on here?" Chen demanded, his eyes darting between his staff and the couple. "Paul, report. Why is my flight not boarding?" Before Paul could stammer out a response, Keenan stepped forward, extending a hand. "Mr. Chen, I am Dr. Keenan Carter, and this is my colleague, Dr. Simone Dubois. I believe it would be best if we had this conversation privately." Chen looked at the proffered hand, then at the 2 blue passports still sitting on the counter. His professional composure, honed over 2 decades in the airline industry, cracked. He recognized them instantly. He had seen them perhaps a dozen times in his career, carried by ambassadors and cabinet secretaries. Their appearance at a gate, especially in a context of conflict, was his worst nightmare. His entire demeanor shifted. The harried manager vanished, replaced by a man showing profound, almost reverential deference. He shook Keenan's hand firmly. "Dr. Carter, Dr. Dubois, my deepest apologies. Please come with me." He gestured towards the glass-walled office behind the podium. He then turned to Arya, his voice a low, furious hiss. "Don't touch anything. Don't say a word. Just wait." Inside the small office, the sounds of the terminal were muted. Chen was profusely apologetic. "I cannot begin to express how sorry I am for the treatment you have received. This is unacceptable. It is a profound failure on our part. Your employee, Miss Clark, accused us of being scammers, refused us boarding, and threatened to call security," Simone stated, her voice clinical and precise, listing the offenses like symptoms of a disease. She did this publicly, based on what we can only conclude was racial prejudice. Chen winced as if physically struck. There is no excuse. None. I assure you, we will be conducting a full and immediate investigation. Her actions do not reflect the values of Royal Imperial Airways. The issue, Mr. Chen, Keenan interjected, is that for the last 20 minutes, her actions have been the values of Royal Imperial Airways. She was your representative, and she has now jeopardized the timely execution of our official duties on behalf of the United States government. The implied threat was clear. This was no longer a customer service complaint that could be smoothed over with air miles and a bottle of champagne. This was now an official incident. Chen swallowed hard. "What do you require? A private car on the tarmac in New York?" "Anything. It's yours." "What we require," Keenan said, "is to get on that plane. Now. And we require a formal assurance from your airline that this will be addressed at the highest level." Of course. Immediately. Chen spoke into his radio, his voice strained but authoritative. This is Chen at 24B. I am personally escorting 2 passengers onto Flight 117. Hold the flight. I want Captain Mallory at the aircraft door to receive us. He then turned to Paul. Take over this gate. Get these people boarded. Ms. Clark is to report to my office and wait for me. She is not to interact with any more passengers. Is that understood? Paul, looking relieved to be given a clear, sane order, nodded vigorously. Yes, sir. David Chen personally escorted Keenan and Simone down the jet bridge, bypassing the rest of the queue. As they walked, the whispers followed them. The story was already solidifying among the passengers. The rude gate agent had picked on the wrong people, and they were some kind of secret government agents. The man who had been filming sent the video to his group chat with the caption, "You will not believe what just happened at Heathrow." At the door of the aircraft, Captain Mallory, a distinguished man with silvering temples, was waiting. He had been informed of a VIP protocol issue and was expecting a minor diplomatic hiccup. Chen quickly briefed him. The captain's face grew grim. He turned to Keenan and Simone, his expression one of deep professional mortification. Dr. Carter, Dr. Dubois, on behalf of the entire crew of Royal Imperial Airways, I want to offer my sincerest apologies. Please allow us to make your journey as comfortable as possible. Whatever you need, you have only to ask. They were shown to their seats, 1A and 1B, in the quiet, exclusive cabin at the front of the plane. A flight attendant immediately appeared with glasses of vintage Dom Perignon and warm towels. The apologies were endless, sincere, and deeply uncomfortable. They were now being treated with the kind of fawning reverence that was just as dehumanizing, in its own way, as Aria's hostility. As the plane finally pushed back from the gate, a full 45 minutes behind schedule, Simone leaned her head back against the plush leather, the champagne flute untouched in her hand. Well, she said with a sigh, that was something. It was ugly, Keenan said, his gaze distant. He was watching the lights of London recede as they climbed into the night sky. And it's not over. What do we do now? Just accept the apologies and move on? Keenan was silent for a moment. He thought of the countless times he'd experienced smaller versions of this. The random security checks, the suspicious glances, the assumptions of service staff. He had always chosen to rise above them, believing that engaging would only dignify the prejudice. But this was different. This was public. It was egregious, and it had crossed a line into interfering with their work that had global implications. No, he said finally, a new resolve hardening his voice. We don't just move on. People like Aria Clark operate in the shadows of institutional apathy. They count on their victims being too tired or too intimidated to complain. They count on the system to protect its own. He looked at Simone, his eyes meeting hers. She picked a fight with 2 people whose entire careers are built on drafting policy and writing detailed, irrefutable reports. Let's give the CEO of this airline something to read on his Monday morning. Simone's expression transformed. The fatigue and anger were replaced by a focused, determined glint. She reached for her laptop. I'll pull up the passenger rights conventions from the IATA Accords. You start drafting the timeline of events. Be specific. I want times, quotes, and the names of witnesses. The hum of the Rolls-Royce engines was a steady drone as the A3 Aerwahash charted its course across the Atlantic. On the ground below, Aria Clark sat in a sterile office, her world shrinking with every passing minute. But 35,000 feet above, Keenan Carter and Simone Dubois were meticulously crafting the document that would ensure the consequences of her actions would be inescapable, comprehensive, and devastating. The business-class cabin of Flight 117 was an oasis of engineered tranquility. The lighting was soft, the noise-cancelling headphones effective, and the flight attendants moved with a hushed, almost invisible efficiency. For most passengers, it was a space to unwind, to watch a movie, to sleep. For Keenan and Simone, it became a war room. They declined the multi-course meal, opting instead for coffee and sparkling water. With the steady glow of their laptop screens illuminating their determined faces, they began to construct their response. This was not going to be an angry, emotional email dashed off in the heat of the moment. It was going to be a weapon, a precise, strategic, and unassailable piece of communication designed to dismantle every possible defense the airline could muster. Keenan, the policy expert, began with the framework. "We structure this as a formal incident report, not a customer complaint," he dictated, as Simone's fingers flew across the keyboard. "We need to establish the factual basis first, devoid of emotion." Section 1. Timeline of events. He recounted the incident with photographic clarity, from the moment they approached the podium to their conversation with Captain Mallory. He included exact timestamps he'd mentally noted. 18:05 GMT, approached gate 24B podium. 18:07 GMT, Agent Clark first questions validity of tickets. 18:12 GMT, publicly ordered to step aside. 18:25 GMT, Agent Clark falsely claims seats are double-booked and offers a flight 6 hours later in economy. 18:28 GMT, Agent Clark accuses us of perpetrating a scam and threatens to call airport security. Simone, the scientist, focused on the evidence and impact. Section 2. Breach of protocol and international conventions, she added. Royal Imperial is a signatory to the Montreal Convention. We cite Article 19, delay. But we frame it as a delay caused not by technical or logistical failure, but by a willful and discriminatory act of an employee, which makes it a far more serious breach. She brought up airline regulations and UK law. We should also note the potential violation of the UK's 2010 Equality Act. Her actions constitute direct discrimination based on race. We need to use that specific legal terminology. For the next 2 hours they worked. Keenan drafted paragraphs detailing the potential diplomatic ramifications. He explained, without revealing classified details, that their timely arrival was linked to a sensitive briefing concerning global health security funding, a topic of immense importance. He phrased it carefully, implying that the delay caused by a single gate agent could have had tangible consequences for international cooperation. Simone, meanwhile, cross-referenced the employee number she had glimpsed on Oraya's ID badge with a quick online search, finding a LinkedIn profile that confirmed her name was Arya Clark, an employee with over a decade of service. She documented the name of the junior agent, Paul, not as an accomplice, but as a witness. She even noted the presence of the passenger who had been filming, describing his location and appearance, establishing that there was third-party evidence of the encounter. The masterstroke, however, was the distribution list. This report was not just going to the generic customer service email address. Keenan, using the secure satellite Wi-Fi, accessed his diplomatic contact directory. The to line was addressed directly to Sir Gregory Pike, the celebrated and notoriously meticulous CEO of Royal Imperial Airways. The CC line was a work of strategic genius. Jonathan Powell, Head of Corporate Security, Royal Imperial Airways. Anne-Marie Fletcher, General Counsel, Royal Imperial Airways. The Office of the U.S. Ambassador to the United Kingdom, London. The Office of Protocol, U.S. Department of State, Washington, D.C. The Civil Aviation Authority, CAA, United Kingdom. The Department for Transport, United Kingdom. "Are we sure about this?" Simone asked, pausing for a moment as she looked at the list. This is escalating it to a state level. She accused United States diplomats of being criminals and impeded their official travel, Keenan replied grimly. That is a state-level incident. She just didn't know it. The airline needs to understand that the apology of a station manager is insufficient. This requires an institutional response, not a customer service gesture. We're not doing this for a travel voucher, Simone. We're doing this so that the next couple that looks like us doesn't have to go through what we went through. With the report complete, a 5-page, meticulously footnoted and legally precise document, Keenan read it over one last time. It was cold, professional, and devastating. It left no room for interpretation, no possibility of being dismissed as the ranting of disgruntled passengers. It was a formal notification of a major diplomatic and legal failing. Simone attached a scanned copy of their diplomatic credentials to the email, a final, emphatic piece of evidence. She hovered her finger over the trackpad. "Ready?" she asked. "Send it," Keenan said. Simone clicked. The email, with its explosive attachments and high-level recipients, shot out from the aircraft, arcing through a satellite and down to servers in London, Washington, and beyond. It was 11:30 p.m. London time. In his penthouse apartment in Knightsbridge, Sir Gregory Pike was enjoying a final glass of whiskey before bed. His phone, which was linked to his high-priority email server, buzzed on the nightstand. He rarely received emails at this hour. Annoyed, he picked it up. His eyes scanned the subject line. Formal incident report. Flight Rye Ilhan 17, LHR JFK, U.S. diplomatic personnel. His annoyance instantly evaporated, replaced by a surge of adrenaline. He sat up, his whiskey forgotten. He read the first paragraph, then the second. He scrolled down to the CC list and felt a chill run down his spine. The U.S. State Department, the CIA. He didn't even get halfway through the report before he was dialing his head of operations. "Get me David Chen at Heathrow on the line." "Now," he barked into the phone. "And find out everything there is to know about a gate agent named Aurea Clark. Wake people up if you have to. I want a full report on my desk by 6 a.m. This is a code red." Across the Atlantic, an aide at the State Department saw the email, and recognizing the names of two of their most effective attachés, immediately forwarded it with an urgent flag to the Assistant Secretary for Diplomatic Security. The digital bomb had detonated. Keenan and Simone had not just launched a complaint. They had launched a coordinated, multi-pronged counteroffensive from 35,000 feet. While Aurea Clark was likely at home, complaining to her cat about her terrible day at work, the foundations of her life were being systematically demolished by forces she couldn't possibly comprehend. The corporate headquarters of Royal Imperial Airways, a gleaming glass and steel structure near Heathrow, was a hive of frantic activity by 5 a.m. Sir Gregory Pike, a man renowned for his icy calm, had stormed into the building before sunrise, his face a thundercloud of controlled fury. The email from Kenan Carter and Simone Dubois had landed like a targeted missile, and its blast radius was widening by the hour. The first casualty was any hope of containing the situation. By 6:30 a.m., Sir Gregory had received a curt, "Please explain" call from an undersecretary at the Department for Transport. By 7 a.m., a senior aide from the U.S. Embassy was on the phone with the airline's general counsel, using phrases like "serious breach of the Vienna Convention" and "unimpeded travel of diplomatic agents." The internal investigation, led by a formidable and utterly ruthless head of HR named Penelope Gable, was swift and brutal. She started with Aurea Clark's personnel file. It was not, as it turned out, pristine. Over her 12-year career, Aurea had accumulated a string of minor complaints, all with a disturbingly similar pattern. Agent was unnecessarily rude. felt profiled when asking for assistance. Agent seemed to target non-white passengers for baggage checks. Each complaint had been handled at the station level, resulting in a slap on the wrist, a note in her file, and a mandatory but ineffective online customer service refresher course. No one had ever connected the dots to see the mosaic of prejudice they formed. Next, Penelope interviewed Paul, the junior gate agent. In the sterile quiet of an HR meeting room, away from Aria's intimidating presence, Paul told them everything. He recounted the conversation almost verbatim, his voice shaking slightly as he described Aria's scam accusation and the threat to call security. He was shown security footage from the gate, silent but crystal clear. The footage corroborated every detail of Keenan and Simone's report. Their calm demeanor, Aria's aggressive posturing, her dismissive wave of the hand, and the stunned, frozen moment after she saw the diplomatic passports. The most damning piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. The passenger who had filmed the incident, a tech entrepreneur from California, had woken up in New York, seen a news alert about a diplomatic travel incident at Heathrow, and realized he was sitting on a gold mine. He sent the video to a reporter at The Guardian. By 9 a.m., the story was on the front page of The Guardian's website, under the headline, "U.S. Diplomats Accuse Royal Imperial Airways of Racial Profiling." The video, shaky but clear, was embedded in the article. Aria's face, her voice dripping with condescension, was now available for the world to see and hear. Aria Clark was summoned to headquarters for a 10 a.m. meeting. She arrived flustered but defiant, still clinging to the belief that she was the victim, that she had just been doing her job and had been tricked by fancy passengers. She walked into a boardroom to find not just her union representative and a station manager, but Penelope Gable, the airline's general counsel, and two very expensive-looking external lawyers. "Miss Clark, thank you for coming in," Penelope began, her voice devoid of any warmth. "We have received a formal complaint regarding your conduct at Gate 24B yesterday evening." "It was a misunderstanding," Aria began, launching into her prepared defense. "They were being difficult. Their tickets showed an error. I had to follow procedure." Penelope held up a hand, silencing her. "Miss Clark, let's not waste each other's time with fiction. We have the report from the diplomats. We have a detailed statement from your colleague, Mr. Paulson. We have the gate's CCTV footage. And," she paused, sliding a tablet across the polished mahogany table, "we have this." The video from The Guardian was playing on the screen. Aria watched her own performance, her voice echoing in the silent, cavernous room. "I don't know what kind of scam you two are trying to pull." The color drained from her face for the second time in less than 24 hours. The union rep, who had been whispering assurances to her moments before, now sat back in his chair, a grim expression on his face. He recognized a lost cause when he saw one. "Your actions were not a misunderstanding," the general counsel said, his voice cold. "They were a reckless, prejudiced, and unauthorized deviation from all company protocols. They have caused this airline significant financial and reputational damage. They have instigated a diplomatic inquiry from a key allied nation. They have made us the subject of international ridicule." Aria sat in stunned silence, her world crumbling around her. Her little kingdom at the gate, her perceived authority, her righteous indignation. It had all been a fantasy. In the real world, she was a small, expendable cog in a massive corporate machine, and she had just thrown a wrench into its most sensitive gears. "You are, of course, suspended with pay, effective immediately, pending the outcome of this disciplinary hearing," Penelope said, "a mere formality. But I think we all know what that outcome will be." Aria was escorted from the building by security, stripped of her ID badge and her dignity. She stumbled out into the daylight, blinking, dazed. Her phone was buzzing incessantly with notifications from friends and family who had seen the news. Her face was everywhere. She was no longer Aria Clark, gate agent. She was Airport Corin, a global symbol of petty tyranny and racism. The airline, meanwhile, went into full damage control. Sir Gregory Pike issued a public statement, a masterclass in corporate contrition. He announced Aria's suspension, a full-scale review of all discrimination policies, and the implementation of new, mandatory, in-person training for all 30,000 of their frontline employees to be designed by an external diversity and inclusion consultancy. He ended the statement with a direct, personal apology to Dr. Carter and Dr. Dubois, and announced a significant, 7-figure donation to a global health charity in their name. It was a comprehensive, expensive, and humiliating capitulation. For Aria, however, the corporate fallout was only the beginning. The real karma, the hard, life-altering consequences of her actions, was still waiting in the wings. Her 15 minutes of infamy were just getting started. 1 year later, the world had largely moved on from the story of the Heathrow gate agent. The news cycle, in its relentless churn, had found new outrages, new heroes, and new villains. But for the individuals at the heart of the drama, the echoes of that day, at Gate 24B, were still shaping their lives in profound and divergent ways. Dr. Kenan Carter and Dr. Simone Dubois were in their Brooklyn brownstone, packing for another trip. This time, it was to a conference in The Hague, where Simone was the keynote speaker. The incident had, unexpectedly, elevated their profiles. They became reluctant symbols of grace under pressure. They had respectfully declined all interview requests, choosing instead to channel the experience into their work. With the airline's large donation, they had helped establish a new fellowship program for aspiring epidemiologists and diplomats from underrepresented communities. They had turned a moment of personal humiliation into a legacy of opportunity for others. They were thriving, their partnership stronger than ever, their commitment to their work deepened by the reminder of the quiet, insidious battles that still needed to be fought, even far from the front lines of disease and diplomacy. The airline, Royal Imperial Airways, was still feeling the aftershocks. The mandatory retraining program had cost them nearly £10 million in lost man-hours and consultant fees. Their stock had taken a temporary but significant hit, and the reputational damage lingered, especially in the crucial North American market. Sir Gregory Pike had made good on his promise. The airline's internal culture was being painstakingly overhauled. The Clark Protocol, as it was grimly nicknamed internally, became a case study for all new hires on how a single employee's prejudice could trigger a multi-million-pound corporate catastrophe. David Chen, the station manager, had been promoted for his deft handling of the initial crisis. Paul, the junior agent, was now a gate supervisor, known for his calm demeanor and unwavering fairness. For Aria Clark, however, there was no promotion, no new beginning. There was only a long, slow, grinding descent. Her termination from the airline was swift and final. The union, faced with irrefutable video evidence, had been powerless to save her job. She tried to sue for wrongful termination, claiming she was a scapegoat for systemic failures. The case was laughed out of court, leaving her with a mountain of legal bills. The infamy was inescapable. Her name and face were forever linked to the viral video. She was a pariah in the airline industry. No carrier would touch her. She tried other customer-facing jobs, hotel reception, car rentals. But a quick Google search by any potential employer was all it took. The digital ghost of her worst moment followed her everywhere. She had to sell her small flat on the outskirts of London to cover her debts. She moved into a cramped rental room in a town she didn't know, where she hoped no one would recognize her. The anger that had once fueled her sense of authority at the gate had curdled into a bitter, corrosive resentment. In her mind, she was the true victim. It was the fault of the entitled couple, the treacherous colleague, the spineless corporation, the merciless media. She never once accepted that the architect of her downfall was herself. Her hard karma was not a single dramatic event, but a slow, agonizing erosion of a life. The final crushing blow came on a grey Tuesday afternoon. She was working a cash-in-hand job cleaning offices after hours, a physically demanding, anonymous existence. As she wiped down the glass walls of a boardroom, she saw a corporate training video playing on a large screen, left on by mistake. The video was about de-escalation and unconscious bias, and the case study they were using was hers. She saw the grainy footage of herself at Gate 24B, her face twisted in a sneer. She heard an actor's voice narrating her mistakes. The agent makes her first error here, basing her assessment on appearance rather than documentation. She saw actors portraying Keenan and Simone, calm and dignified. She saw an actor playing a version of herself, aggressive and prejudiced. She stood there in the empty, silent office building, a cleaning rag in her hand, forced to watch a sanitized, corporate-approved reenactment of the moment she had destroyed her own life. The power she had craved, the authority she had so viciously wielded in her tiny kingdom, had vanished. All that was left was this: an anonymous woman cleaning the offices of people who used her life's greatest failure as a lesson in what not to do. There was no sudden epiphany, no moment of redemption. There was only the quiet, humming fluorescent lights, the reflection of a tired, defeated woman in the glass, and the cold, undeniable truth that the cage she had tried to build for two innocent people had become her own, inescapable prison. The flight to New York had departed long ago, but for Arya Clarke, the gate was now, and forever, closed. The story of Arya Clarke, Dr. Kanan Carter, and Dr. Simone Dubois is more than just a viral moment of conflict at an airport. It's a powerful, real-world lesson in how quickly the tables can turn in our hyper-connected age. It serves as a stark reminder that authority, especially when wielded without wisdom or empathy, is a fragile thing. Arya's actions, born from a place of prejudice and bitterness, set in motion a chain of events that she was completely unprepared for, demonstrating that the consequences for our choices can often be far greater than we could ever imagine. This isn't just a tale of karma, it's an examination of accountability, both personal and corporate. If this story resonated with you, and you believe in the importance of accountability, please take a moment to support our channel. Hit that like button to help us reach more people, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next deep dive into stories of justice and consequence. Thank you for listening.